In April 2021, True North Organizing Network and the Yurok Tribe collaborated together to apply for the grant Promise Neighborhood. The Promise Neighborhood is a grant that focuses on local resources within the community. The goal is to succeed from birth to college or job readiness age, providing resources like education programs, tutoring support, and much more. Today, I will be interviewing Amy Campbell-Blair, representing True North, and Phillip Williams, representing the Yurok Tribe, to talk about the grant and their plans if they are accepted. First things first, Phillip, what does this grant mean for the Yurok Tribe?
Well, this grant for our community has been able to enhance what the school can do, what the community organizations can do, and it's added to the services that are needed here in the North Coast, adding staff and actually build on the resources we already have. As the Yurok Tribe, and particularly Klamath, the Yurok Tribe, we've had a lot of students that once they come to Del Norte, the Crescent City area, they fall off the radar. The Klamath community, as a whole, we have the little Margaret Keating Elementary School there, and it's a nice little cradle. You know what I mean? Everybody helps. There's a lot of parent involvement right now, but once they go to, Crescent City, they fall out of the cradle. For the Yurok Tribe and the Yurok Tribe Education Department, we're trying to use this grant to make that cradle bigger and to give more support. We have a huge failure rate once our children get to Crescent City. And it's not a knock on the education system. They're just pretty much big city lights, and they're lost. They get lost, not used to the huge classrooms. And, in our small elementary school, they get a lot of personalized attention. And so they lose that once they get to Crescent City, because Crescent City's lots of students, lots of information to get out there, and they get a little bit overwhelmed. And so we're trying to use this grant to expand that cradle so we can ensure success of our students. And also we've identified that some of the kids aren't programmed for college. And so the component that I've represented here is the career technical education, the vocational side of it. Also, it's not just for the Yurok Tribe either. It's for the entire community, all the groups. And so I think that's one of the important things about this grant, that it kind of brings the community together, enhance the services we already have, curriculum, mostly staff. We're all horribly understaffed up here in the North Coast. And hopefully that's what this grant's going to fill that need.
So you guys applied for the grant. Do we know for sure that the Yurok Tribe will get accepted for the grant?
We submitted the grant April 19th, and the Yurok Tribe will not hear back probably until end of summer, early fall at the earliest. The Yurok Tribe in itself is a resource and makes us a pretty good viable candidate. Also is a factor in our favor, which often that's not a factor in our favor for certain things, but in this case it is. And so the grant writer, Allison Ramsey, who really kind of like helped this all come together, she has successfully won 2 grants like this for communities down in Southern California. And so she had like a pretty good idea of like what was required to like get together in this application grant. And so that in itself also helps us feel pretty confident. You never know. The idea is that we want to infuse resources in a particular community, and part of that is about being in schools, and part of that's about being in the community. And really the goal is to help provide more of like that support, that overall comprehensive support for students, whether they're in Klamath, whether they're in Crescent City, whether they're in Smith River. And there's definitely schools that we would be wanting to focus on, Margaret Keating in particular being one of them, but also Crescent Elk, and there's a couple other schools. And the idea right there is that, when you look at schools where there are students who maybe don't have the supports they need right now, if we can infuse resources there, that's not going to just benefit them, that's going to benefit the whole community. And a lot of times when you focus in on the people who need the most, that benefits everybody. And sometimes, if you try to stretch your resources too thin and try to help every single person, and you're not like focused, the money doesn't always go as far. And it was interesting interesting how like when we were putting our budget together, like $30 million is kind of a lot of money. But when we were just looking at, because we talked to a lot of people in the community, we did outreach to the schools and our 0 to 5 providers, and we talked to tribal members, and we talked to, different communities. And because of where we're located, there's just a lot of resources that exist other places that just don't exist here. And it's kind of like, right, if you have this image of a net and it's got like really big holes, how can we make those holes like much smaller? Like so that like people are actually being cradled and are actually being given the support they need to thrive, because sometimes that's all that people need, right? They just need those extra resources to be able to get through school, to be able to have vision and dream about, maybe there's a kid who their family's never gone to college, and so that's just something they never would have thought of, right? There's resources that could help them dream big. And then maybe there's a kid, right, who is like, well, I've never really been interested in college, and all these people are talking about college, right? But like, what about some of these trades? And if we can get more resources into kind of like these technical trades in the high school, right? You can have teenagers who are really in a good place as they graduate and can kind of think about, the career that they want to have, whether it's here or somewhere else.
I like to add, because of our location up here on the North Coast, we're out of the way of the mainstream California government. We're always an afterthought. And, because I'm on the tribal council, we're always petitioning the government for funding and for help. And one of the asks that I've been asking the government leaders is, don't forget about us up on the North. When they're taking their funding and they're spreading around, I look at it like frosting a cake. And I've been asking the government leaders, make sure you spread that frosting all the way out to the edges, meaning us. We're on the edges. So I'm hoping that that's a strength because of our location, where we're at, and lack of resources. Up here in the North, we're at a huge disadvantage. So I'm really optimistic that we'll successfully get that grant. And I think the True North organizing has put together a great team to make this happen.
Say, metaphorically, you got accepted for the grant. How soon would that be put into effect, do you think?
If we win this grant, there's a 6-month planning phase that we're required to go through, and that would start January 2022. And then once that planning phase is over, then the actual implementation of whether it's programming or hiring people, and even in that 6-month planning phase, we could start hiring if that's what made sense. But that's kind of how it goes, right? And then actual implementation in schools would happen fall 2022. And then because there's money that is allocated in our budget towards other community programs, that could potentially happen sooner than the fall, but it kind of depends on how our planning process goes.
And then to kind of follow with that, how long does this grant cover for?
So it'll cover 5 years for sure. And then within those 5 years, there's opportunities. So a big component of this grant is that it really does require community collaboration and planning. And, the Yurok Tribe would be the lead kind of backbone organization that would be driving it. But there's a lot of partners that the Yurok Tribe would be working with. And so we're all going to have to be in close communication. It's also very data driven. They want to see that the things that we're implementing are actually kind of doing what we think that they will do. And so kind of along the way, there will be opportunities that if our data is improving, that will help us, with either extension funding or, other funders would be able to look at that and be like, oh, this is really cool. What you're doing is working. Let's extend this beyond the 5 years. Because really that's honestly a goal with anybody, right, who kind of relies on grant funding. But I think in particular, this is an opportunity that would infuse a lot of resources, that there's going to be a lot of people at the table who will be invested. And because it's not just one organization, it's multiple organizations, I think there's going to be a lot of ways to help extend it beyond those 5 years.
Does this grant only cover Yurok students, or does it cover all tribal students?
No, this is a community-driven project, and not only natives. We've identified the Hmong community, we've identified the Hispanic community, and also all children. And I think that's one of the strengths of it, binding the communities together. That's why I really like it. As a Yurok tribe, we're always grant-driven, and it's always for our own natives. And sometimes we meet a lot of criticism, for that, but that's what the government dictates to us. But I think this grant gives us the opportunity to be portrayed portrayed in a better light, that we actually are community driven. Any community leaders know you can't just address one group in a community and expect it to be healed. Community is the whole. And I think that's one of the strengths of this grant, is it's for everybody.
That's fantastic. Is there anything you specifically want to achieve during this grant?
I mean, we have a component of it. We're just the lead entity, so it's not all Yurok Tribe driven. But some of our achievements that we're looking for is to increase our staff levels, because we're horribly understaffed. Enhance the tutoring services, and also some of the curriculum, to have that tailored towards the Yurok community for our part. We're only 1/3 of this grant, so I can only speak to the 1/3 of it. Transportation is a huge issue that we've identified. Last chance grade, kids being transported from Margaret Keating to Crescent City. Also, even we have Yurok tribal members in Crescent Elk, and due to situations in their family, sometimes they need transportation. And so that's one of the components that we've identified. And also, like for me, as a laborer, a person that didn't go to college, I'm really highlighting the career technical education part of it, because not every child has the ability to go to college. And so we are trying to strengthen the hunger for higher education. And I'm not talking about college, I'm talking about career-oriented, career-driven, working with them, trying to expose them. Because a lot of times when you're in a small community, you don't have a lot of exposure to careers. And so that's one of the achievements that I have tried to push in there, is to broaden the horizons of the Yurok kids, so they can see what a fireman does, so they can see what a police officer does, a carpenter, or whatever they choose. But I always feel like we need to expose them to make a decision, and to give that drive to continue their education. I've always felt like the reason a lot of our kids drop off, because they're not exposed to successful, career-oriented people. And I just, because of my own experience as a Yurok Tribe kid growing up in Margaret Keating School. When I went to Del Norte, as an example, I didn't identify with anybody there. So I didn't really have anything career driven. And so I had all the intelligence to go forward, but I didn't have a goal. I didn't have anything that lit the fire inside of me to go for. And so I feel like that's what I'm trying to push, is to light that fire inside them young people, the Yurok Tribe kids, to give them something to strive for, so that when they go to school, they're happy to go to school. They want to get through school, and they want to be a carpenter, a fireman, truck driver, heavy equipment operator, whatever that is. And that's one of the achievements that I'm trying to push through this grant.
I think that was great from the Yurok standpoint. And I think what I would add is from some of the other partners that would be partnering with the Yurok Tribe. So just to get concrete, for example, one of the performance indicators is that the children are kindergarten ready. We need to improve our rates of kindergarten readiness. And so like in Del Norte County, our data says that there's about half of kids who are kindergarten age, and they're just like not ready for kindergarten. And so what that kind of indicates, right, is there's a lot of like support and resources that needs to go into that 0 to 5 age. And sometimes those resources are spotty for children, especially if you're living in an outer line area where it's harder. Sometimes services get concentrated in Crescent City just because of that's just the most efficient use of resources. But then that means that families out in Gasky and Smith River and Klamath a lot of times, suffer because of that, because they don't always have, the transportation they need. They don't always have the time in their schedule to be able to drive to Crescent City and back to make sure that their kids have what they need, right? So a very specific example would be that we want to use some resources to expand services that the Family Resource Center offers, because the Family Resource Center has a building and a place where they have programs in Crescent City, and they used to have satellite offices in Klamath and Smith River, but those don't exist anymore. They even had one in Gasky, and so we want to restore those services so that families in those areas, some of the services they offer, just a safe place to go and play with your kid, and there's really fun toys and you can read to them, and yeah, there's also classes. But sometimes even once you're in the school system, resources can vary based on school site. But if you're not even in a school site, because we don't have universal preschool, because we have a high need for early child care And we don't necessarily have the resources to provide that, especially for working parents or parents who just do a lot of volunteer work in the community. And sometimes you need a little break from your kids because they need other adults in their life. And you don't always want to be relying on auntie and mom. And that's great, but it takes a whole community to raise a kid. And so I think infusing resources into that is lots of evidence that shows that those early years, putting resources into that really help kindergarten readiness, gets people oriented toward where they need to be. And some of this, right, like we have partners that we want to fund, and there's still a lot of like little details that need to be worked out, but that's just kind of like one example of a direct connection. We believe infusing resources into things like Family Resource Center, things like First Five, and making sure that they expand to the outer lying areas and making sure that they're culturally relevant. You know, something that came up in discussion was when we talked about the Wonder Bus and how the Wonder Bus is great, but it'd be, better if we could get, some Yurok culture infused in kind of the way that like that operates and runs. And everybody really loved that idea. And if we had more resources, we could do that.
That would be fantastic. I would love to see that.
I was on that same train of thought, but I'm going to take that further. And we'll also look at this grant as a celebration of all cultures. Our perspective was we wanted more Yurok curriculum, but, the Hispanic culture, they're going to want to celebrate theirs, the Hmong culture. And that's what I feel was a strength of this grant, because people of color in the mainstream school system have a hard time in finding somebody to identify with, and a lot of times their emotional needs aren't met. And I felt like that's what the parties were representing, was to get Hmong teachers in there so the children can identify with, Hispanic teachers so they can identify with, and bring it all together as a celebration of culture in our community. That's how I felt about it.
Well, those are all my questions I have. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Oh, I would just like to add that, there was a great group of people that came together to make this grant happen. It was on short notice and everybody's come together, but all the entities came together and made this happen. There was a lot of good feelings about it, a lot of hope that I think is the beginning of binding our community together.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is the work that was done through building healthy communities in the last 10 years. I feel like it was such a good foundation for not only bringing people together around this, but just to even lay the groundwork for being able to think about, to even be able to just show, right? Like, here's things that we have, here are the resources that exist already. And we have a lot of amazing people resources. And sometimes it just needs to be infused with monetary resources, because that's just the world that we live in. I really believe that if we can get this money, we'll be able to utilize the talents that already exist here. And because a lot of times making things happen, you have to pay somebody, right? Because they don't have the time to volunteer and make it happen in this world and in this economy. And being able to provide people with jobs and being able to provide people with a livelihood, and that they can do something that they love and care about and be in the community that they care about, is a really big deal. And I think that the relationships that have been forged between organizations, between, tribe, in this work that's been done, so many of the people that came together, they've been in this for a while. And it's amazing to be able to ask them this question of, if you were dreaming, what would you ask for? Don't think a mindset of you can only ask for the bare minimum. What would your dream be? And some of those dreams, are pretty big and we can't fund it. But there were honestly some dreams that if we get this money, we can actually fund those dreams. And I'm pretty excited about that. I feel like it's a situation where, we want to be careful and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, we might not get it, but I can't help it, right? The hope is just infectious.
No, I'd like to add to that same train of thought. When it comes to funding and money and all these groups, they get really tight and everybody's always got their territory that they're protecting. But with the team that was created through this, everybody kept an open mind, even though they had their wants and needs. We all worked together. So whether we get this grant or not, I felt like it was a great team effort, and it showed open-mindedness of the community and our leaders.
And I want to thank you both again, Amy Campbell-Blair, for representing True North, and Yurok Tribal Council Member Phillip Williams. Thank you for the beautiful summary about the Promised Neighborhood Grant, about what it is and what you intend on doing. I can't wait to see the outcome. And once again, this is Christina with Redwood Voice. Thank you for tuning in to KFUG 101.1 FM.